Good afternoon. Oh, wow, that was fantastic. Normally we have to do that more than once. Today is June 13th. I know it, right? What's the significance of June 13th? Well, it's unlucky for some, it's 13, right? It's unlucky for some, but today is a very lucky day for us for a number of reasons. First reason, it's the first official day of staff appreciation, which I want to note. Oh yeah, you can cheer, go. I want to note, though, that staff appreciation isn't just a week-long thing. This is something that should and will be occurring on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So we're kicking it off right now, but I want you to know that we're anticipating having more of these kinds of events throughout the year, not just in a short week in June. So more on that to come, but that's reason number one why the 13th is a good day and a good number. The other reason that 13 is a good day is I was sort of looking at the calendar, and there are 13 more business days until our Chancellor designate becomes our Chancellor. So, indeed. So I am going to move aside and ask Chancellor designate for 13 more days, Chris, to join us on the stage. Thank you.
After that introduction, I wish I were the 13th Chancellor. I first wanted to thank all of you. I feel so lucky to be working with a staff of the extraordinary caliber of Berkeley staff. Thank you for all the hard work you do. Thank you for your creativity. Thank you for your public spirit. Thank you for working here. So this is my appreciation for you. My task is a bittersweet one. I'm going to introduce the keynote speaker, Nasir, who has unfortunately only after this one 2 more days at Berkeley. And I've never felt so happy for someone to be moving into a position that's just an extraordinary position of importance in the world of education, both K-12 and higher education, as head of the Spencer Foundation, but also felt such sadness at the loss this represents to Berkeley. Naila, as many of you probably know, is a Berkeley alum, though she went down south to UCLA to do her graduate work, and she even did some teaching at that place just a little bit south of us on the peninsula. I've gotten to know Naila in the time that she's been Vice Chancellor for Equity and Inclusion. I think of that position as one of the most difficult positions on the campus, because you are at one and the same time responsible for representing in the Chancellor's Cabinet and to the administration, various people in the administration, the interests of many groups, the interests of disabled students, faculty, and staff, the interests of underrepresented minorities, the interests of our lesbian and gay population. At the same time, that you are part of that administrative team. So you have to be really adept at, have deep as part of your identity, empathy, and be able to represent the point of view of another. At the same time, then you have to be part of that administrative team that's figuring out what are the best actions for the campus to take. Naila has done wonderful things with all of the programs that are part of her portfolio. As Vice Chancellor of Equity and Inclusion, she has really built a leadership team, and that's an extraordinary accomplishment. And I've come to so much admire her voice on our leadership, that is the Chancellor's leadership team. She always speaks from a deep integrity. She always speaks with empathy and compassion. She knows when to speak most effectively, when to intervene, what to say to move a discussion forward. And I've seen this not only with the Chancellor's Cabinet, but also with the many groups that she works with, negotiates with. She has good humor and an even temper. Indeed, I don't think I've ever seen her angry or dispossessed. And she also showed an enormous care for the leadership team itself. This was not an easy year at Berkeley, as I'm sure many of you know. And Naila said the things that often some of us weren't willing to say about the kinds of difficulties we were facing and how best to face them. So I'm so pleased that she is delivering this keynote address. I cannot imagine anyone better to deliver it. So please welcome Naila Nasir.
Good afternoon. So this is my last talk at Berkeley in this position. And I was really anxious about what to say and how to frame it and what to talk about, because I thought, well, it's staff from all over the campus and I don't want to bore them, and it's Staff Appreciation Week. So I landed on really thinking about this as an opportunity to reflect on Berkeley as an institution and kind of invite you into my living room, as it were, for a cup of coffee. So we are sitting now in my living room with a cup of coffee, reflecting on Berkeley and what it means to be here at Berkeley during this time, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities. And I want to also share just a bit at the end about the specific work of equity and inclusion and what it means for us to do that work as a community. And I'll talk a tiny bit about my own research, the point where my research intersects with the work of E&I. So that's my plan. I want to thank you, Carol, for that lovely introduction. I have to say, I've been distracted for the last couple of weeks in meetings in the Chancellor's conference room. I don't know if some of you have been there, Steve. I know you know the room well. So there's a set of pictures on the wall of all the chancellors and previous chancellors. They're all men, and they take up a whole wall. So I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, are they going to move the pictures over? Are they going to start a new wall that's going to be like the woman's wall? So, you take a picture and send it to me once they get that picture up. And I want to also, as Carol did, thank you all for your work. It has been really, I think, a challenging year and a challenging couple of years for staff in particular. I think faculty are relatively protected in many ways, though faculty are taking on lots of extra work and committee work and whatnot as well. But I think, to my mind, staff have borne the brunt of all of the reductions and extra work and taking on extra duties and stepping up when things need to be done in a way that I think we don't always see and acknowledge fully. There has been tremendous amount of change in staffing structures, change in systems, many new, the new student information system and all of the new Bear Buy when that came on, and all of the new systems that you all have had to deftly figure out how to learn and adjust to. I just think it's really the commitment and dedication to this campus among the staff is really, really amazing. It's one of the things that make this place a really hard place to leave. And I've been here in many different kinds of roles. As Carol mentioned, I'm a Cal alum, class of '93. I'm a Cal parent. My daughter graduated in 2014. I was resident faculty, so I lived in the dorm for 5 years. I've been on the faculty in 2 different departments. I've been a department chair. So I've seen this place. My mom was a staff member in the law school for many years. She just retired a year ago. So I've seen this place from lots of angles. And I know it inside and out. So it's going to be an interesting thing not to have kind of my familiar space. One of the hardest things for me about leaving, and I said this for the full 2 weeks that I was contemplating whether I was going to take this position or not, the hardest thing about it was leaving my staff. And I kept saying, I can't even imagine that I'm going to stand up in front of my staff and tell them that I'm leaving. How am I going to do that? And so my staff have made this journey here in this position a team effort. And I always felt every day like there were folks who we shared an agenda, we shared a commitment, we could laugh together, and we could get things done. And I think that for me spreads to the staff networks all over campus. It's been an interesting set of lessons too, because once I did decide to leave, 2 really unexpected things happened. One, I stood in front of my staff and said that I was leaving, and their kind of grace and love and support for me was really, really surprising. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but the level of selflessness in how they received that news was really, really striking for me. And the second thing that happened, which was a deep lesson for me, is that life moved on. Folks stepped up to take on new duties, and we, we didn't run it, but the campus ran a search for my replacement, and the system and the place and the institution adapted. And so for me, it was a part of a lesson about maybe not being so self-important. I tend to feel like people need me. And I know people need me, my kids need me, all that good stuff. But at another level, we each have a role to play for a time, and it's okay when that time is over to go on and do what the next thing is. There was a permission in that for me. So, I've learned so much from this position in my time on campus. I thought that I would, again, just give you a little bit of my reflections on this place and this moment on campus. I was thinking about the place of privilege I have been in to be a part of all the central campus conversations around future directions and what some of the challenges are. And I thought I would share with you some of that conversation and my reflections on it. And then talk a little bit about E&I work in particular. So this is, I feel like I've said this almost every talk I've given this year for campus folks. This is a challenging time. And it's a challenging time in lots of ways. And I think one of the key challenges that we've all talked quite a bit about in various ways is the budget. This is a time of budget constraint in a way that no other UC campus is experiencing. And I know that we've talked about it, but I often have conversations with folks on and off the campus, and they say, I don't understand. Like, why are things so tough? Like, you get this money from the state, there are all of these students, it's Berkeley. Like, I don't get it. Like, and what's changed? And so I thought I would just say a little bit about that, because it was a big aha moment for me to have access to those conversations where they explain, why is there a budget deficit? So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that, but I just thought it might be interesting for you all. And there are really three kind of higher order reasons why we're in such a challenging financial moment. The first is that there was this rebenching process where the UCOP changed the formula around which UCs got what part of the funding, and in that formula change, Berkeley lost $70 million a year. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, because I think there are these rumors that it's like administrative bloat or mismanagement or, so there's that. We are also the oldest campus, and our physical plant, just our buildings, our grounds, need a lot of attention, and there's not state support for that, for building new buildings or renovating buildings when they need renovation. And we have a relatively expensive faculty, because the faculty are so amazing that they get offers lots of places, and in order to keep them, it's relatively expensive. And so there's some really kind of higher order, and we don't have a medical school, which is the other thing that many of the UCs that have a medical school brings in lots of money, underwrites lots of expenses. And so I think the good news is that while we've had a tough couple of years, and there are likely one or two slightly less tough, hopefully, years coming, we're on track to resolving the budget deficit, and we're thinking really at the highest levels of campus about income generation. So I actually feel like, wow, things are tough. Things are tough on the road to becoming better. And that gives me a lot of hope for the future of this institution. So I hope that that helps to kind of contextualize these conversations you might be hearing or a part of around the budget. Another challenge I think we face as a campus is the issue of, I would call it, institutional trust. We don't have a lot of trust on this campus with one another or with the central administration. And I think that staff probably hold more trust for the campus than some other stakeholder groups. And I think we saw this quite a bit in my position in equity and inclusion, when we would do something that the campus community felt like was something positive and good. It would get attributed to E&I, not to campus. And I guess if I could leave you all with one message, it's all the same thing. Like, what happens through your department is campus. What happens through the divisions is campus. We are all campus. And when we other it and make the campus decisions about what other people are doing, we give up our power. And so I think one of the great lessons of this position for me has been there's a lot of power in owning what you know and sharing what you know and engaging. Another major challenge that won't be a surprise to any of you is our challenges around campus climate. And I think, obviously this past year we've had all these controversial speakers, and that's hit campus in a particular kind of way. But I think that there have also been ongoing campus climate issues for folks from marginalized groups, disabled people who are not only face people not understanding visible and invisible disabilities, but also just the physical structures sometimes don't support them in reaching their full potential here on campus. Folks from racially and ethnically marginalized communities. There's a really interesting kind of moment that happened in the wake of our response to I'm blanking on her name, the last high-profile speaker that came and didn't come, Ann Coulter. So, we responded as campus trying to make sure that the campus community was safe, right? And so there was this pretty significant police presence on campus. And one of the things that happened is one of our students was arrested on campus as a part of that. He had a pocket knife and he was a formerly incarcerated student. And the way that set of events kind of unfolded made me think so much about how their campus climate issues that we're all wrestling with. Does this campus feel safe? Does it feel like a place of home? And then they're heightened for folks from particular kinds of communities where our relationship to systems of authority and power leave us vulnerable. And part of what it means to work on campus climate is to work both at that general level of how do we have a campus that feels like home, because it can be so big and so amorphous and so unwieldy, and then how do we have the structures that support that home feeling for all of us, even in moments that are dire. So I think a lot about that. I think a lot about the ways in which certain members of our community face a set of microaggressions or everyday slights, assumptions about your competence. I had a very senior colleague come to my office when I first took this position, an older white man who asked me, we're having this conversation about his unit and what's going on, and he asked me how old I was. And I was like, that's interesting. What an interesting question. Because it wasn't just about age, right? That was also about gender and about race and about the sets of stereotypes we hold around who should be in a seat like mine. And I kind of don't even take it very personally, because I think we're all swimming in this sea of stereotypical notions. So it was like his brain was just trying to come to terms with how somebody who looked young and black and female could be sitting in the seat that he felt like was a seat of power. So I think I made some kind of joke. But I think that brings home for me the way in which there's so many moments when our privilege gets in the way of our humanity, of our understanding one another. And privilege is a really interesting thing, because when it's operating in our favor, we can't see it at all. It is utterly invisible, which makes it hard. And I have a story about this of my own. When I first graduated with my PhD from UCLA, I taught at Sacramento State. I taught 2 classes and was so happy to have just a little bit of work and to get away from my kids. So it was kind of I got in the car, I was living in the East Bay, I'd get in the car, drive up. And I remember some of the staff, the student services staff at UCLA, felt unkind to me. Where you'd go in and you'd need something and they give you a hard time and you have to show your ID. But the staff at San Francisco State, they were amazing. And I was like, wow, this is such a great experience. These staff are amazing. And then I heard one of my students talking about how difficult experience they had had in student services at Sacramento State. I'm saying Sacramento State. And I thought, nothing changed except my position in a system, right? I was in a position of privilege as a faculty member, but I didn't assess how I was being treated that way. And so I think that's an important lesson for me that I carry with me every day, that you can't see when your privilege is operating, and so it's really important to step back and to listen when people tell you they're having an experience that might be very different than yours. I think another challenge that we have on this campus is how we're framed in the media. And some of that is that, the campus community has learned that when you want to get the attention, when you need to get something done, call a reporter, right? And I think that doesn't do us a very good service. But I think it also impacts this campus climate stuff, because then we're seeing a reflection of ourselves in the media that doesn't fit with what we experience, but it's always negative. You're like, why are these reports about us always so negative? And I think that there's a real challenge around that as an institution and as a community, because those things, I think, in some way create fissures in our community. And all of that, and this is my final kind of negative thing before I turn the corner on challenges, is that I think we're challenged around morale. Folks have taken on so much, and we keep hearing how hard things are and how hard the budget is, and it's hard to feel safe and happy in your work when those are the conversations that are happening. So, but I think there are also so many opportunities in this moment. And I see this sometimes more when I'm away from campus, the high regard that people hold this campus in, and the different experience I have here as an administrator and as a faculty member. because of the community that exists. And when I say community, for me, that's people who are amazing at what they do, who are the top faculty, who are amazing staff members, who are creating programs and running programs, and the students that we have that are just brilliant and grounded and hardworking and kind of gritty. You don't get that mix anywhere else. You don't get the brilliance and the grit together, which for me is what makes this place just incredibly, incredibly, incredibly special. Yes. And I think sometimes I have to step back and think about what it is we're all doing here. Because on the one hand, we're all having lives here. We're working and we go to meetings and we do stuff and people ask us to do stuff and we find parking and all of that. And or not. And at the same time, what happens in this place are scientific discoveries that change the world. And we all get to be a part of that. That's phenomenal. For me, that's a phenomenal way to spend my life energy in a place that is going to make discoveries that make the world different. And both kind of scientific discoveries in the way that we think about them classically, like, new types of rubber or whatever kinds of things people do on that Science Center campus, but also the Center campus, make things that make things better. But also the ideas that get generated, the science that happens in ethnic studies and African American studies and sociology, where people are creating the theories that help us understand the world differently, that are the foundations upon which we can create equity, upon which we can examine privilege and marginalization and make those kinds of social changes to the world as well. And we do our excellence here with a social conscious. This is the most community-oriented, community-engaged campus that I have ever been on. And I think that's partly connected to our continuing high percentage of first-generation and low-income students. We used to be able to say we had more low-income students, more Pell-eligible students on the Berkeley campus than all of the Ivy League schools combined. We can't say that anymore because that was an equal amount, and it just doesn't roll off the tongue in quite the same way, but you get the idea. I think that's a part of our mission that makes this place really, really special. And so I think this fiscal moment will pass, and hopefully we'll be a better institution for it. And those things that make us who we are, that excellence, that research, that grit, that building things is our legacy and our place really on the national and international scene. And I also thought I'd share with you a few coping mechanisms that I've used because, all of that wonderfulness is all there around us. And in the meantime, we're dealing with difficult colleagues and supervisors who may or may not fully understand and appreciate our brilliance. Students who at times in the semester might be a little on edge with finals. And so I thought I'd share just a few coping mechanisms. Since this is my parting talk, I'll leave you with a bit of wisdom, as it were. First is sometimes you just need to take a walk around campus and breathe. Like sometimes you have to stop and look up. Enjoy the trees and the greenery and what's left of the grass. I had a colleague, we had a really difficult budget meeting earlier this fall. And we had a colleague show up in a way that could only be described as toxic. And after the meeting, we were all kind of checking in by text. And one of my staff members, Fabrizio Mejia, said, "Yeah, I had to go meditate just to get through the rest of the day." And I really took that to heart. Like, yeah, you can sit and close your eyes and have an inner moment. So those, all of those, like attending to your body, drink water, eat, stretch, make sure that you're taking care of yourself because you're going to need yourself to make it through some of the daily challenges. I also sometimes have to just stop and enjoy how amazing my colleagues and students are. Just really think about and enjoy the way people show up with good humor and amazing outfits and outrageous comments and wonderful Twitter posts, and just really enjoy the people in our community, because that's really the treasure that we have here. And in that spirit, like, go to events and talks and graduations. You don't have to know somebody that's graduating. Graduation is an amazing, amazing time. I go to 5 or 6 of them every year. Because I think there's probably a video out there somewhere of me salsa dancing at the Chicanx Latinx graduation. I do not salsa dance well, but it was the spirit, it was the moment. But that's the moment where you see what this place means to people and what a social change engine we are all participating in here. I also sometimes have to remember that, and probably the people that work with me have to remember that managing up is a part of the job. And if you see each exchange as an opportunity for growth, reframing challenging situations as an opportunity to learn something new, to show up differently, to stretch yourself, it can make those challenging moments a little easier to handle. And I would add to that, part of what I try to do sometimes I look at my schedule. The weird thing about being a vice chancellor is you don't control your schedule. Like, other people make the day for you. And so it's a little bit of a surprise. Like, you come in the morning, you're like, oh, I have 12 really difficult conversations to have today. It made Carol laugh. You get that. And so I try to approach each conversation, not every day, but like when I can remember, as like an opportunity to grow in my own empathy and compassion and kindness. The world offers great opportunity for practice in that way. To practice not making assumptions, to practice responding to a lack of kindness with kindness, to practice letting negative things roll off your back, to practice being proactive about supporting others, to decenter yourself sometimes. Like, we can get so self-absorbed. To remember sometimes it's good to move yourself and your ego out of the way, and other times it's good to really remember to love and honor yourself. But to know that throughout the day you might practice each one of those things, and to make the day kind of an adventure in that way, to become more Christ-like, more Buddha-like, more Muhammad-like, more Abraham-like, whatever your faith is, more like that. I think obviously a lot. Oh, yeah, I missed a couple things. Oh, because I really wanted to say this part. So managing up, and there's this saying, while I was on this note of spirituality, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, but occasionally your supervisors do. I was cracking up at myself at that last night. So I want to encourage you as workloads increase and as more and more is being demanded of you, to also be comfortable saying when it's too much. I don't think we should be expected to take on more than what feels humanly possible to us. And it's hard to see and know if we don't have the self-love to stand up and say, you know what, this little extra thing you want me to do, I would love to, but what are you going to take off my plate so that I can do it? Because I can't do all of it. So just the confidence and the self-love to do that. And then finally, one of my coping strategies is finding the humor. Pretty much every situation around here could be funny if you look at it from a different angle. And I know I have to sometimes censor myself, because I'll be in a meeting and something will strike me as funny and I'll like crack up. And sometimes it's inappropriate. So you have to keep the laughter to yourself sometimes, or like text a friend. That's why I miss Harry LeGrand so much. He was my texting friend in the meetings. I would text him jokes and funny comments about people, and sometimes he would just say, stop. Well, you got to enjoy it, right? So I wanted to say a little bit. One of the things that Joe asked me to talk about was kind of to think about the connections between my work here in E&I and my faculty work, my scholarly work, my portfolio of research, because I am, contrary to my daily life sometimes, I'm still a researcher and a scholar, and I like to study things and write things. My work focuses on issues of identity and learning. So I'm an education scholar. I study race and education. And so I look at some of my early work was about the intersection between thinking processes and social processes. So, and that what that evolved. So some of my earliest studies, my very first study actually, looked at African-American high school basketball players and what they learned about average and percent as a part of their practice of basketball, and how what they knew about mathematics didn't show up if you were talking about school, but did show up in kind of the basketball context. So I used that as just an initial window into the way that the way that we learn and the way that we think is actually deeply cultural. It's deeply connected to our sense of who we are, which led me to a whole series of studies on identity and the connections between identity and learning. And I think part of what that has led me to, when I think about how that connects to the work that I do in equity and inclusion, is that people learn in spaces where they get to be their best self and where they get to be all of who they are. People do not learn in spaces where who they are fundamentally is not accepted. And I think that extends to thinking about our workspace, that if educational spaces need to be loving spaces, they need to be spaces where we can take risks as learners, where we're not afraid to take risks, where and we can't thrive in places where we can't take risks, where we're not held in high regard, where there are not structures that see and nurture our potential. And I would say structures and people that see and nurture our potential. And I think the same thing holds when we think about workspaces, that work can be a significant part of how we see ourselves and who we are, and though, sometimes it's just a job too, which we have to remember. But similar to classrooms, workspaces can send us messages about who we are: smart, competent, good writer, people person, whatever that is, or what we are not. And we're positioned in relation to those ideas that people have about us. And it's also similar to schools in that stereotypes operate in our workspaces and on campus, and we have to be diligent to continue to defy them, not to make assumptions about others, and to be institutions that provide opportunities for people to learn, to grow, to become their best selves, where they are valued, where their work and their contributions are meaningful, and where they resonate with who they are. I will never forget, I did this series of interviews as a follow-up to the basketball study, where I'd started to see. So there was this moment in one of the interviews where I was giving kids math problems that were about basketball and math problems that were about school. And one of the kids, when I gave him the basketball problems, he was like answering them and see, it's this, and if you have 3-foot line and you think about that, and you have these great, wonderful mathematical answers set in that context. And then when I pulled out the school problems, he was like, oh, you know what? I need a pencil. And he left and never came back to the interview. And I think what that signaled for me was how important it is. And the mathematics of each task were exactly the same, right? And what that meant for me was that people engage intellectually when they feel a sense of identity and connection. And without that sense of identity and connection, we can't be our best thinkers. And so that it's critical then that we have spaces that are spaces of love, that are spaces of compassion, that are spaces of joy. And not just like you can layer that on to the thinking work, but like that has to be there for the best thinking work to happen, kind of in a fundamental way. And so I wanted to ask you all to take a moment and think about, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit more in the Q&A, to think about what in your workspace would need to change to make it a space of joy and compassion and love for you, or how you would need to change to make that space feel that way, right? And how we as an institution structure those things in, so that it's not something we each have to figure out how to create in our particular workspace. And so maybe we can have some more conversation about that. So I'm going to stop there. And I think Joe is going to come up. We're going to do a little conversation, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Thank you.
Are these on? Is yours on?
I don't know. Is mine on?
Yours is
Mine is on.
Is mine on?
Maybe it's on, but not live. This is teamwork right here.
How many ladies in dresses does it take to figure out?
It says it's on. Say something.
I'll say it again. Is it on? No. Do we have a technical person in the room?
Oh, wait, no, here you go. It was just on mute. Say it now.
Is it on now? All right, here we go. Okay, well now we've got that challenge over with.
They don't just give away PhDs, you know.
Clearly. This is the has, this is the has not. Clearly I got the wrong degree. All right, so you know what, I have a couple of questions that I got from the audience earlier, but I recognize the fact that there's still a whole bunch of people that probably have better questions that I didn't solicit input from. So I'm just going to ask you one question and put everyone else on alert that you should be thinking about your own questions. The first question I have for you is around polarization. And it seems like we got a lot more of that going on, not only in our society, but also I think we could safely say in our own community here at UC Berkeley. And there's less middle ground than perhaps we've had in the past. So can you just speak a little bit to what do we do about that, especially as staff members? Is there something that you could say that, you know, how we could fix that or close the gap, widen the middle?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think first I would say, you know, I was at I don't know if others of you had a chance to go to the Haas Institute Othering and Belonging Conference. I see a couple of heads nodding. Amazing, it's an amazing event. They do it every 2 years. So John Powell was giving this talk. And to me, John is just one of the like visionaries of our time. So if you have a chance to hear him speak, like go. He was talking about how, like what happens in big kind of cycles of change over historical time. And one of the points that he made is that when there's change, societies react to change by kind of hunkering down and dividing. And so it kind of put all of it in a little bit of a bigger context. So he was kind of reading a lot of what's happening on the national political scene as partly being about the changing demographics of our country and society and members of society struggling with those changing demographics and figuring out what that means for us. And so I think if we maybe have a micro version of that on this campus, there has been so much change and so much turnover. And it just creates, I think, a system that feels precarious and unstable to us as community members. It's like not being able to kind of settle in and relax and count on things to stay as they are and to be safe. So I think first we have to recognize that it's been a time of exponential change of all kinds on this campus. The leadership changes, the budget changes, what the budget changes mean for how we have to work differently, realizing that many of our systems were outdated and having to create new, like all of that has been the context within which these other things are set, right? And what happens when we feel unsafe and there's lots of change? Well, we hunker down because, God, you gotta find some space of safety. And I think, so I think there's a lot of power, though, in us as staff and as members of this community to define what it looks like and feels like to be a part of it. And I think some of the things are so simple they sound a little hokey, right? Like speaking to each other, like smiling at one another, like asking, you know, how was your weekend? And trying to do the things that make the space feel human. Like another thing I've been thinking so much about in my scholarly work is when academic spaces feel humanizing and when they feel dehumanizing. And what it means. I can sometimes be a person, I like to get to the business. Like I have a lot of to-do lists and a lot of stuff to do, and I sometimes go straight to I jump into a meeting with my chief of staff, like, okay, what do we have to do? Da, 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 da. And sometimes she'll just stop and be like, good morning, Naila. Like, how are you? I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that part, the people part. But it's really important to attend to that people part, and I think that's part of what we can do. I think the other part of what we can do is really listen to each other and listen to perspectives different than our own, and realize that our perspective and someone who holds the exact opposite perspective can both be true. I don't know if any of you have ever been to marriage counseling. That's one of the things they talk about in marriage counseling. Not that it was very successful for me, but that's another story. But
actually, that's my second question. No, I'm just kidding.
But that was a big aha for me, that wow, the way that our brains work and the way that our memories work and the way that our emotional needs work, we can actually have two polar opposite opinions that are both right. And if that's true, then that changes the task. The task isn't to figure out who's really right? The task is to hear each other and figure out what we need to feel okay, to feel whole. So I think those are what comes to mind in answer to your question.
That's super. Thank you. Yeah, words of wisdom. I'm betting, well, you actually said that you learn on a daily basis and you practice on a daily basis, which implies that you're learning as you're practicing.
Right.
So,
and failing sometimes too.
All of the above. Yeah. So just give me one thing, and then it really is your turn. One thing that you learned, big thing that you learned in this role on this campus.
Okay, I don't know how this is going to sound, but I think one big thing that I've learned is that you can have a room full of well-intentioned people, or a campus full of well-intentioned people, as the case may be, or 3 well-intentioned people, and those well-intentioned people can create policy or practice that is damaging beyond anything they could imagine. And maybe I should have said that the other way. I don't know if there is another way. But I guess what I mean by that, I know. I guess what I mean by that is that good intentions are not enough, right? And that, and partly the way that I've learned this is people calling me on something I thought was a great idea because my intentions were good and I wanted to fix something, but it wasn't the fix that the community I was working with needed, or it wasn't the thing that they thought would be a fix. And so, the combination of good intention and having solutions or policies that you vet with the people who are going to be affected by them, that's probably my biggest takeaway from this position.
I'm seeing some nods from the audience on that one for sure. Okay, that's terrific. Questions from the audience? There's one right there.
When are you coming back?
So the question was, when are you coming back for those people who are
Well,
streaming?
so here's the beautiful thing about a faculty position is that I still have my faculty position. So I'm not actually leaving, I'm not actually quitting my faculty appointment. I'm on leave officially. So that means if I go to Chicago and realize it really is, really is cold, right? I have this relative that has this saying, you didn't know fat meat was greasy. And so it's a Southern thing. So I have the option of coming back within a year if I don't like it and want to come back. But this place is my, and not to be all sentimental, but this place is my home in so many ways. I talked a little bit about some of my lessons as a vice chancellor, but so many lessons just as a student here, in all of my roles, living in the residence. So I feel like this place is always with me. And plus, I know y'all are going to be hitting me up for money in various departments, so I'll remain connected in all kinds of ways, I'm sure. And I'm also a believer that you never predict the twisty, turny path of your journey, that it takes you all kinds of places and back sometimes. And so I'm kind of open to where the journey takes me.
I know I'm feeling a lot better about that answer. Good question. Thank you for that one. Other questions?
I wanted to ask a question about that last part you said when you were talking about engaging intellectually, when people identify, have a connection, and making it spaces of joy and spaces of love. How do you think it's possible to do that for specifically marginalized people on campus when people don't look like you, when experiences don't embrace most of the other world's experiences, and not making it just lip service or making it academic? Because so many times it's like you give that opinion, you want to figure things out, and then automatically we make it an academic issue and not really keep it, human and tangible. Because it's hard to try to fix certain things if there's 10 of you on campus and we don't actually just say what it is.
Right. Well, I'm a fan of saying what it is. I mean, Carol alluded to that about the chancellor's cabinet meetings. I think we dance around things a little too much sometimes, and so I think we have to be willing to articulate our needs in spaces, and I think we've seen lots of examples of that. What is it? I feel like in some ways this speaks to the point of you don't recognize the privilege that you hold, which means, and since we can't, it's very hard to recognize how it feels to have a lack of privilege, whatever that privilege might be. Maybe that privilege is walking into a meeting room and seeing people that look like you. I will never forget joining the African American Studies Department and going to a meeting where we were admitting doctoral students and being like, wow, we can do this, and like y'all get me, and I can make my jokes. I don't have to censor my There's a feeling of comfort and community in that for me that I had not realized until that moment I hadn't experienced as a faculty member. And I like my colleagues all over campus, and at Stanford I love my colleagues in education, and so it's not that, right? It's not that I don't like you, don't want to be right. It's just there's a different kind of cultural homeness when you can be in a cultural space. And so I think that we have to be willing to articulate that need, understand what the institution can and can't do in terms of providing it. And a lot of what we don't have, we do have the power to create. And it's part of, it's funny because I feel like the vice chancellor position gives me a little bit of a bird's eye view on how different folks approach the same problem, right? And so I think there's so much space. One of the nice things about this being such a large, amorphous campus where there are many, many, many things happening is you can create what it is that you need. You don't necessarily have to ask for permission. Sometimes you have to ask for resources. But you can say, I need a network of women in athletics, or I need a network of, let me call a meeting and invite people to it. Let's do a monthly walk around campus. I think feeling like we can not just lament what we don't have, but create what we need is really, really a mindset shift that we have to come into. And of course, I'm not saying, resources matter, infrastructure matters, all of that. And I don't want to individualize a structural challenge, but I think in our spaces, we can both create the spaces we need and push for the structural changes that we need, right? There are lots of changes that have been created on this campus by a handful of folks getting together and deciding that this is what we need. I don't know if any of you followed the moment when we were going to outsource the childcare services. That was really 3 women, faculty members in the ed school that were like, yeah, no, you won't. And they didn't. And it's really expensive and still. But I think that feeling like you can push for the things you need is really important.
I had 2 different questions, and I'll let you choose which one to answer.
Okay. Choices.
One is, to me, a lot of what you talked about might fall very, very broadly under quality of life, how to make this a better place to be and live and work, and people be their authentic selves and realize their potential. And those are emotional. They're sort of towards one end of a Myers-Briggs or whatever, And how to talk to data-driven people. My daughter sells real estate, and she said you first have to understand what language the buyer. Are they a numbers person? Are they a feelings person? Are they a design person? It's about how the house looks. You have to know who you're talking to, so you talk that. And then the other is, as you're leaving us, just choose one. I know it's too. So I woke up the day after the election, and I walked onto campus, and I thought, Berkeley is a beacon and a target. We are a beacon and a target. And what has happened has, unfortunately, I still think that way a little bit. What do you say to us about our role in the world as you leave us to, go forward in the next year?
Yeah, no, I think that both points well taken. I think you're exactly right. Berkeley is a beacon and a target. And sometimes being a target makes your beacon light brighter. Meaning, when you're a target and you still show up, with integrity to what the institution stands for, I think that can be very, very powerful. And it feels like this is a moment for that. And in some ways, it's a moment, it's a national moment that's calling our values and our commitments into question. And so one of the things, I think there have been some beautiful things that has sparked, like when the president decided that we were not going to sign on to the Paris Climate Agreement, that governors and mayors stood up and were like, well, we are, which is, I think, there's something about the coalescing of our values, and when they're challenged, that we dig in deeper and push harder. I think there's something really important both campus-wide and nationally about that. There is a challenge there, though, which is, and I don't really quite know how to articulate this, that the challenge is the boundary to that is what falls within and outside of the law. And so I think that's the gray area as an institution. As an individual, you can decide to break the law for what's right. As an institution, that's a little bit of a more challenging set of decisions. And I think that we may end up facing more and more of those moving forward. I think this moment is calling us to step up differently, and what we will need to step up as an institution differently is stronger connections with each other and a stronger internal infrastructure and kind of being on the same page internally. We fight a lot amongst ourselves, and sometimes we fight and we agree, and we still fight. We fight because the way I want to do it. And so I think we have to, this moment may be calling for a little more cohesion.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. Okay. We're going to go up the back here.
Hello, good afternoon. I have a question that I've been thinking about for some time now. Generally, I'd like to ask, what has been equity and inclusion solution for certain justifications that are given on campus by our administrators around this idea that out-of-state and international students support our domestic students and the type of socioeconomic divisions that causes for students that are domestic students, that are in-state students who actually read these contradictory reports that come out through the state California audit system. And I just wanted to know how you interface with that and what are different ways that there could be some solutions around helping students feel less socioeconomically divided, feeling like they're subsidized, like they're living in a welfare state, even though corporate welfare seems to be a lot more prevalent in our society.
Yeah, it's a complex set of things. I think we tend to oversimplify it, too, on either side, right? Either increasing the proportion of out-of-state students is a really bad thing that takes away the resources from the rest of the students, or it's a really great thing because they pay so much money. Again, as a campus, we're facing a challenge that's about thinking about our work and our financial models differently, right? So because of the defunding from the state, we are having to think much more like a private institution than we ever did before. And some people use that language of, corporatizing the university. I don't entirely disagree with that, but I don't entirely agree with it either. In an ideal society, yes, we would have our university, a state university, funded by the state. That's not the reality that we're in, and so the bone to pick there is with the legislature. It's not with the campus leaders, right? The campus leaders get what we get. You got to make the campus run. You got the bills. You got to, in your own household, you got bills. You got money coming in. You have to make them match some kind of way. And so I don't think that the campus administration is interested in corporatizing. They're interested in making sure the doors stay open and we continue to offer courses and opportunities, right? So I think that as a kind of fundamental premise. And so in that landscape, the increases that we've made that are capped at a certain percent to out-of-state students are a part of this new financial reality. Again, private schools have been, charged very high tuition because this issue of the financial reality is just something that has to be faced. I think on campus, the notion of a welfare state or some students subsidizing others is completely misguided. Because the problem with it is we are born into particular levels of wealth. It's not merit-based. It's just you get what you get. And you get what you get in a system that is built on the backs of marginalized people. And this, our society, the nation, is built on the backs of the exploited labor of marginalized people. And so you can't then fast forward a couple hundred years and say, well, you poor people, well, you can't afford to come here. Well, we built the place, so perhaps we might think about that a little differently. So if you're thinking kind of from a societal lens that's informed by history, you know that that kind of subsidizing is really just a tiny step towards making right many, many, many historical and contemporary wrongs. And so for me, it's about what are the values we aspire to as a society around equity, and always keeping in the frame the historical injustices that have landed communities. I mean, I say historical, they're not past, like historical and current injustices in the way systems operate that land us where we are. So we're just doing our bit to not be as egregious, right? I'll leave it at that.
So sadly, I'm looking at the clock. I'm getting the little signal from up front here. And it seems like we're pretty much out of time. But I wanted to thank you, Naila, for being here, for continuing to come back to Berkeley after doing lots of different things. So I'm hopeful, as the question suggested, that maybe you'll come back again. Thank you for challenging us today. I think you really had us think about how we show up. You talked about the fact that we're all one campus. You talked about the fact that we should try not to let privilege get in the way of our humanity. You talked about the brilliance and the grit of Berkeley and how we need to try and maintain that. You gave us, I counted 5 different coping mechanisms. One that I like is, especially and use it quite frequently, is walking around campus and breathing. You talked also about finding the humor, which of course is something that we all need a lot more of, especially as we show up in our day-to-day. And trying to change ourselves or our work spaces to create more joy, more love, more compassion. So thank you for helping us think and challenge ourselves on how we show up and how we move forward on this campus. This is exactly what I hoped you'd do, and I'm so grateful to you for coming and imparting your words of wisdom today on your last lecture.
Thank you.
Naila also brought some gifts, and for those of you who have stayed and are in the room, we have a fish bowl.
Yeah, not those of you who are live streaming from your desks.
Yeah, we have a fish bowl, and I'm going to ask Naila to pick out. And she brought these gifts. So we have a few.
So I can't take credit for wrapping them, nor picking them out.
I hear that there are some signed copies of your book.
There are, yeah. Some other goodies.
There may even be some
connected to
other
last
goodies.
night's event.
Yes. Go Warriors. Okay.
All right, you ready? 795335.
All right. Come on up.
Come on up.
All right. Well, I think we have several more here, so let's keep going. 795302.
Yay.
Congratulations.
795382.
Is that you?
Jenny. 795349. Nope, somebody left early. 795308.
All right.
Yay. And is it one more? Last one. 795314.
All right. Last but not least. Yes, I have been reminded that there is a reception with drink and food, some snacks, and I think that Naila, are you going to stick around for maybe a little bit?
I will be right here, yeah.
Yeah. So I recognize that we didn't quite get to everyone's questions, but Naila is going to stick around, and as I said, there's food and drink. So please stick around for a little while longer, and let's create and build this community that we just spent some time talking about.
That's great. That was a great ending.
Oh, thank you for. You were great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Oh, of course. Thank you so much.